My name is William Armeline, and I'm the director of the San Jose State University Human Rights Institute. It's my pleasure to welcome members of the press and public today for the release of the 2021 Silicon Valley Pain Index. The 2021 Pain Index illustrates the persistent racial discrimination and wealth inequality that continues to define our region. The purpose of this yearly report is to provide a measure of structured inequalities to inform policy and practice in Silicon Valley and Santa Clara as a human rights county. Its inspiration can be found in Professor Bill Quigley's Katrina Pain Index following the devastating 2005 hurricane. First produced in 2020, the 2021 Pain Index updates prior findings and illustrates a stunning increase in inequalities over the last year. As communities weathered global rebellion against racist police violence, a global COVID-19 pandemic and vaccine rollout, and an economic downturn producing high unemployment rates in the face of still rising housing costs. The 2021 Pain Index examines over 60 of the most recent studies and reports conducted on Silicon Valley and is composed of over 80 statistics designed to be read from the numbers 0 to 2 trillion for impact and effect. One thing that I want to point out about the index is that this information that we put together is not terribly difficult to find. And what that tells us is these problems are not in fact being hidden, they're being normalized. And that is in fact what we find most terrifying about these issues. Again, they are not being hidden, they're being normalized. By exposing these devastating levels of inequality, the San Jose State University Human Rights Institute's hope is that city councils, county supervisors, state legislators, scholars, journalists, and community organizations will use the Pain Index to inform their work according to appropriate human rights standards. As the annual Pain Index is released each June, it can be determined if the public policies produced over the previous year have led to any change in structured inequalities, help point to their causes, and inform their solutions. Please see the SJSU website, www.sjsu.edu/HRI, and follow us on Twitter for all materials, announcements, and updates. Other cities and counties interested in developing a pain index of their own should please contact Dr. Scott Myers-Lipton, who you'll see in a second, or the SJSU Human Rights Institute for information and potential support. And with that, I would like to introduce my colleague in sociology at the Human Rights Institute, Dr. Scott Myers-Lipton, the report's lead author.
So welcome everyone, thank you. So this is a really important report, and by having so much press here shows that you recognize the importance of the report and what our community leaders are about to say about the report. So thank you so much for coming. And you'll have a chance, by the way, to interview anyone afterwards too, right? So you'll have that. A year ago to this very day, June 23rd, the SJSU Human Rights Institute released the first Silicon Valley Pain Index of 2020. At that time, our community was shocked at the high levels of racial discrimination and income and wealth inequality that's exhibited in our county. Sadly, unfortunately, the 2021 Silicon Valley Pain Index, which, as Bill said, examines over 60 of the most recent studies that have been done on Silicon Valley, over 80 statistics, shows that the level of inequality during the COVID pandemic has gone from bad to horrific. Incredibly, the 2021 Silicon Valley Pain Index shows that most all pain indicators have worsened, as hunger, housing insecurity, homelessness, high school dropout rates, income inequality, wealth inequality have all increased. Specifically, food insecurity increased fourfold during the pandemic, with Second Harvest of Silicon Valley providing over 500,000 clients each month. I had to call them because I had the report, and I said, is that accurate? Because that is 1/4 of our population in Santa Clara County. I had to ask them, and they said, it's accurate. It's what we're doing presently. Housing insecurity has skyrocketed as almost 200,000 households face the risk of eviction. That's up from 12,000 in 2018. High school dropout rates, which we should be deeply concerned about, because if you don't have a high school degree, you're not going to be successful here in Silicon Valley, or nearly successful. 8.9% to 14%, almost 3,000 students dropped out of our schools, with the largest increases for the houseless, English as a second language, and Latinx community. Meanwhile, while this devastation was being brought to our medium, low income and working class folks, the top 10 Silicon Valley moguls, all white men, increased their net wealth from $248 billion to $571 billion, an increase of 130%. So just to get around that number, like what does that mean? 571 billion, that's 571 million, right? It's 1,000 million. So it's $571,000 million that these 10 folks have. If you add that all the Black and Latino people in our county, and they work their whole lives, and you add them all together, it won't reach that level of net wealth of 10 people. While they were getting their not fair share, at the same time, African American incomes decreased in our county, down 1%, down 1%. In addition, racial discrimination and how it permeates all our institutions here in Silicon Valley, which were highlighted in the 2020 report, continue to negatively impact the lives of people of color and to privilege white people. We often don't say that, by the way. We talk about what's happening to people of color, privileging white people. The 2021 Pain Index reports Silicon Valley tech executives, right? We're known for tech. Silicon Valley tech executives and senior management are still dominated by whites, even after years and years of promises to bring about change, and the numbers are still staggering. There are 0 African Americans on Cisco's executive leadership team out of 13. There is 1 black person as part of, we all love our apples, our gadgets. Well, there's 1 black person who's a part of Apple's executive and senior management team out of 123. Just 2% of Google employees are Latinx women. Only 3.9% of Facebook workers are black, and just 1.5% are African American in tech jobs. There are only 5 black executives out of 285 at Cisco. Lastly, even though Latinx folks compose 23% of our labor force, they hold just 5% of all Silicon Valley jobs, tech jobs. And this ongoing racial discrimination has huge and negative implications for our community. One more point. The Pain Index was written as a response to the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and many others in the global uprising that took place and is taking place in response. The #1 in Bay Area for fatal encounters with the police. Not Oakland, not San Francisco, not other places. San Jose is #1, with 0 prosecutions. African American adults are 6.6 times more likely, and Latinx adults 2.2 times more likely to be given a local infraction by the San Jose Police Department as a result of a non-traffic stop than white adults for loitering, smoking in a park, possession of a shopping cart, and so forth. 40 black youth are detained in juvenile hall for every 1,000 young African Americans, in comparison to 10 for Latinx community, 2 for white, and 1 for Asian Americans. And the cost to house a person in juvenile hall is up almost 200% in the last 10 years to $531,000. Finally, all aspects of COVID-19, testing, who contracted it, the death and the vaccination rates, demonstrate how race and class privilege white and or wealthy communities and harm working class and or people of color. I'll give you just a couple examples. 13.6% of white residents contracted COVID-19, even though they are 32% of the population. In comparison, 50.3% of residents who contracted COVID-19 were Latinx, even though they're 26% of the population, while Vietnamese and Filipino people had almost 2 times the rate of COVID infection as the larger Asian American population. And there are many, many examples of this type of inequality in the report around COVID. As Bill said, by exposing these devastating levels of inequality, The San Jose State Human Rights Institute hopes that our legislators, city councils, supervisors, state legislators, Congress members, as well as our scholars, our colleagues, journalists, and community organizations are going to use this pain index to inform public policy and practice and to develop solutions. We're not here just to talk about the problems. We are hoping that this inspires solutions, because what is being inflicted on the Silicon Valley residents is totally unacceptable.
What's up, everybody? My name is Jamal. I currently serve here on campus as the Director of Advocacy for Racial Justice, and I co-chair the Black Leadership Kitchen Cabinet of Silicon Valley. And I am really excited about this study because it highlights something that we know our communities face on a continual basis. It highlights pain. But what I want to speak to is not just the numbers that we see on our sheet, right? Because sometimes when we see numbers, we don't understand how they translate into human lives, how they translate into human experiences, and how they translate into what we see and feel on a daily basis. These numbers that are listed in the pain index represent our community. They represent our brothers, our sisters, our parents, our cousins, our uncles, our friends, and our relatives. The numbers that we see represented on this index that speak to the pain that communities have been feeling in Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley for decades. When I think of pain, I think of the fact that I look at downtown San Jose and recognize that we exist on a lonely land with very little mention or understanding about what that means and how the land was taken. When I look at pain, I think about pain. I think about the fact that Black people are 2.9% of this area, but almost 20% of our homeless population. When I think about pain, I think about the fact that our vendors at the flea market are being ushered out with little recourse and little time to make change, thus furthering the pain that they will feel on an economic level. When I think about pain, I think about the fact that we are one of the richest cities in this country, and our GDP is top 15 in terms of countries worldwide, and yet we still face stark inequality with homelessness and displacement of our communities that are most marginalized. Pain is what we see when we see our police get a 4% raise increase, and yet we see less services being granted to change the conditions that are causing the inequality. Pain is what we know when if we took 1% of our budget towards policing, we could educate multiple of our family members and citizens in community college and university education. Pain is knowing that we have a way around all of this that we're facing, and yet we do little about it. I hope that this study drives change. I want to see this study drive change. I want to see this study really touch the lives of our lawmakers, touch the lives of our council members, touch the lives of our CEOs and our presidents of these organizations, to recognize that we can actually change what we see. We don't have to be okay with homeless encampments on every block. We don't have to be okay with that, because we know that we have enough resource and support to house everybody in this county and in this area. We don't have to be okay with, appreciate that. We don't have to be okay with wages with Black people only making per capita $40,000, which we know is not enough to survive in this area. We don't have to be okay with that. We can pay living wages. We can fight the racial inequality that we see in this area, and we can move past pain. We can move past pain. We can lead with hope. We can lead with love. And that's what I want this index to drive. That's the message I want to send today. And the way that's going to happen is by continually publishing these indexes, continually fighting, continually forcing the hand of our legislators and lawmakers, continually reaching out and telling these companies we will accept nothing less than equality, than equity, and racial justice as we strive to be a better area, a better city, a better county, and a better state for all people, not just those who have resource, but for everybody. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Corina Herrera Loera. I'm the board president of the Alum Rock Union Elementary School District here in our local community. As we continue to mourn the many lives that we've lost to COVID-19 and this pandemic also highlighted the many inequities that we all continue to live. Can you imagine being the one who has lived in poverty and is hearing these numbers and who says, finally, these numbers come to light? I know some of you might be surprised by some of these numbers, but some of us have lived in poverty our entire lives. I'm grateful for Dr. Scott Myers-Lipton and his leadership and effort to continue to bring light to the truth.
Dr. Govetta, Executive Director from Sacred Heart Community Service.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Will, and I want to thank the Human Rights Institute at San Jose State University for illustrating a really important point of what's actually happening in our community and making sure that we're reminded as a community of what we're here to do. You see, annually, Sacred Heart Community Services provides resources like food, utility, and rental relief to over 60,000 people a year. Alleviating the symptoms of poverty in our community is part of our mission, but we also know that we need to really realize the current situation comes from really stems from a communal and systemic failure to address racial and economic injustice in our region. You see, racialized inequality is something that we don't like to spend a lot of time talking about in this particular community, and it was already a smoldering fire, which COVID just turned into a raging wildfire that affected the lives of so many people. And we saw what that vulnerability, the inequality in our community really created, those kind of conditions, where our homelessness prevention system that Sacred Heart is proud to be part of put out $36 million into the hands of 17,000 families to keep them housed over this last year. We're proud of that work, but it only touches a small percentage of the level of need and inequality that needs to happen. And we need policy and other types of reforms that need to happen to make sure that our communities are preserved. You could see that prior to the pandemic, over half of the families that were coming to us, we could provide any kind of assistance to, because the lack of investment and commitment on the part of our policymakers to try to make sure things happen. And even with additional resources, we're only touching 1 in 4 of the families that are coming to us in desperate need of help or support during this time. See, the numbers in the pain index represent the experiences of real people. People who are being blocked out of economic opportunity by a system that's built to enrich the few at the expense of the many, especially Black and brown communities here in Silicon Valley. The pain index highlights broken systems, but not broken people. People are standing up. Individuals that are affected by the pain are standing up and fighting with their allies to try to make systemic change happen. Whether it's actually pushing for resources away from the carceral state, from policing and jails, into the hands of community organizations that are trying to make a difference, whether it's actually pushing for change to make sure that equity and centering the lives of Black and brown communities and those institutions there to serve them are actually given the resources they need to actually make real change happen. But this doesn't happen until we reckon with the challenges that we were facing here long before this pandemic, and which will continue long after, unless we stand up and fight. Thank you.
I don't want to talk so much about numbers, because you've heard a lot of numbers here today, except that Bill Wilson Center this past year has been housing 1,000 people a night, family members, youth, and adults. But when we walk down the street, the community is causing pain. That's the real index, because they don't want to see the homeless anymore. They are fed up. When you hear 9% increase in homelessness in a study, what does that tell you? There was not a study done last year to count the homeless. Because HUD said, oh, COVID, let's not count this year. Let's give it a pass. So we know, you know when you walk down the street, it's more than 9%. But the problem is we let them be in encampments and said, we're not gonna move them because of COVID. But what's happening now is we're reemerging from the pandemic. The community doesn't want to see them anymore. So what are we doing? Sweeps. Oakland's doing sweeps. San Jose's doing sweeps. Every community is ready to say, get them out of our sight. So what does this do to the homeless? It causes pain. It causes us as providers trying to do something, saying, wait, I'm housing 1,000 people a night. I am doing something. but you don't see it because you see that homeless encampment and you say, I want them out of my neighborhood. That is what this pain index is about, is the community saying, we're ready to resurface. We have our money, we're buying houses, but the rest, they're living in encampments and they don't know a way out. That is what this pain index means, and that's what you should get out of this report.
Hello everyone, my name is Tamara Hall and I am a special education teacher in Union School District. I am a member of the San Jose Unified Equity Coalition, and I've got my friend here and colleague and partner in the Equity Coalition pushing for more equitable services in San Jose Unified. As we've learned through the pain index, and for me as an Afro-Latina, someone who has the lived experience, you know, I'm glad that this is coming to light. It's unveiling more information, more data, can allow us to get more services, access to services and more funding towards things that we need to support our most vulnerable students, our system impacted students, our foster care students, our students with disabilities, and our low income students. And, you know, if you think about, well, where does this start? How can we do this? And it's, you know, Dr. Myers-Lipton mentioned we need to get our elected officials to make sure that they're putting policy forward, right? It starts at a local level. It starts in the classrooms when we are choosing to intentionally eliminate the school to prison pipeline, when we're investing in healing-centered approaches, when we're investing in restorative justice practices and mental health services, and making sure that we are reaching out to the schools, to the universities to get, you know, a flow of teachers of color, of mental health specialists of color, like my colleague here, Adriana. You know, San Jose Unified doesn't even pay their counselors, and so that's very limiting for someone who wants to be able to provide for their family, right? They can't get a job in San Jose Unified and they can't support the students in the most healing way, and that's a shame, to be honest. And so things like that need to happen at the negotiations level. They need to happen at the policymaking level. They need to happen in the boardroom for the San Jose Unified School District. We've got a resolution that's really trying to say we put more money in students, stop spending money on cops, and make sure that you're supporting our most vulnerable students. And we know through the pain index, 14% dropped out in schools, and you know, some of them Latinx, some of them unhoused, like my own students in Union School District, unhoused and Latinx. And you think about, well, what can we do differently? And it starts with one person like Lorena, right, saying we need to be more equitable in our grading. We need to make sure that we're providing more teachers of color for our students, more ethnic studies, more robust services, and more money towards it. And you know, the community needs to back those things. And so I'm hoping that people can really support the Equity Coalition as well as the Human Rights Institute in addressing these issues, but also bringing awareness to all of the different actions that are happening around San Jose to make sure that we can actually start investing in our most vulnerable populations here. Thank you.
Again, my name is Reverend Steve Pinkston, and I am a member of the Silicon Valley Interfaith Collaborative. I want to flip the script for a second and look at prosperity. I dare say that many, if not all of us, want or yearn to be prosperous. Some of us will even quote from scripture, Christian scripture, where the Apostle John says, "Beloved, I pray that you may prosper in all things and be in health, just as your soul prospers." When we think of prosperity, I think most of us think of economic prosperity, money, greenbacks. But I dare say that John is talking about a lot more. John, I dare say, is talking about emotional and physical prosperity. John, I dare say, is talking about relational and social prosperity. John, I dare say, is talking about spiritual prosperity. I want you to prosper just as you prosper in health and your soul prospers, he says. I want to move to something that Apostle Paul said in his second letter to the church at Corinth. And when he talks, he's speaking about equity. Not that some would have so much more than I ever need, and some would be scraping at the bottom of the barrel. But Apostle Paul talks about a sense of equity, a sense of balance, a sense of fairness. And he writes, I don't mean that others should be relieved while you have hardship. Rather, it is a matter of striking a balance, of equity. At the present time, your surplus, he writes, fills their needs, so that their surplus may fill your need. In this way, there might be balance, there might be equity. He goes